Imagine being a thief, stealing from a kind old man, and expecting nothing but anger and punishment. But what if the old man had something even more valuable to offer you than money? This is the story of an unexpected encounter that turned a life of crime upside down and changed everything forever. Once upon a time, in a small town nestled between rolling hills, there lived an old man named Mr. Thompson. He was known throughout the village for his kind heart, gentle nature, and a smile that could light up even the darkest days. Though he was not wealthy, Mr. Thompson had a way of making everyone feel important. His small cottage was tucked away at the end of the village, surrounded by lush gardens and towering oak trees. Despite his age, Mr. Thompson had a certain energy about him, a calm, peaceful vibe that made everyone around him feel safe. People would often stop by his cottage just to sit on his porch and chat, and he would offer them warm cups of tea, his favorite pastimes being storytelling and sharing the wisdom he had gathered over his many years. But there was one person in the village who did not share the same peaceful existence. His name was Luke, a young man whose life had been shaped by hardship. He grew up in a poor neighborhood, with absent parents and no real guidance. Luke turned to a life of petty crime early on, stealing what he could to survive. He had no dreams, no hopes, and no belief in kindness. To him, the world was a cold, unforgiving place. He had never known love, and kindness felt like a weakness to him. One chilly evening, Luke found himself wandering near Mr. Thompson's cottage. His stomach growled with hunger, and his mind raced with thoughts of his next heist. He noticed that the old man's house was quiet, the lights dimmed and the door slightly ajar. His instincts told him it was the perfect opportunity. As he crept closer to the cottage, he spotted the old man sitting on his rocking chair, sipping his tea. Mr. Thompson had a peaceful look on his face, seemingly unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Luke's heart raced, but his resolve was firm. He stepped quietly into the house, avoiding the creaky floorboards. He had only one goal in mind: steal what he could and get away without anyone noticing. As he rummaged through the old man's belongings, he came across a small wooden box hidden under a pile of old books. It was locked, but Luke knew that he could break it open easily. He did just that, revealing a few old letters and a small pouch of coins. His eyes widened with greed as he picked up the pouch, the weight of the coins feeling like pure gold in his hands. But just as he was about to slip the pouch into his pocket, he heard a voice. "Luke." He froze. The voice was soft but unmistakable. It was Mr. Thompson, who had somehow noticed him. How did the old man know his name? Luke's heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment he thought he would be caught. But the old man didn't shout. He didn't scream or demand that Luke leave. Instead, Mr. Thompson calmly stood up from his chair and walked toward him. "What are you doing here, Luke?" Mr. Thompson asked, his voice warm and kind. Luke stammered, taken aback by the old man's gentleness. I was just looking for something." "I didn't mean any harm." Mr. Thompson smiled softly, as if he had known all along. "I know life can be hard. We all have our struggles, don't we? But stealing from others won't fill the emptiness inside you, son." Luke didn't know how to respond. He had expected anger, maybe even violence, but instead he found compassion. "I know you," Mr. Thompson continued. "You've been through a lot, but you don't have to keep living this way." Luke looked down at the pouch of coins in his hand, then back at Mr. Thompson. The old man's gaze was not judgmental, but understanding, as if he saw straight into Luke's soul. "Why don't you sit with me for a moment?" Mr. Thompson offered, gesturing to the empty chair next to him. "Let's talk." Confused and unsure, Luke slowly lowered himself into the chair. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Mr. Thompson poured Luke a cup of tea, and they sat in silence for a while, sipping the warm drink. After a few minutes, the old man spoke again. "You know," he said, "I was once like you. I made many mistakes in my younger days. I was angry at the world, felt like I had to take whatever I could to survive. But one day I realized that the more I took, the emptier I felt inside." Luke looked at the old man, his brow furrowed. "What changed for you?" Mr. Thompson smiled kindly. "One day I decided to stop running. I stopped stealing. I started helping others, even when it was hard. And slowly, I began to heal. I found a purpose, a reason to keep going. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it." Luke felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't know why, but hearing the old man's words stirred something deep inside him. The years of anger, hurt, and resentment that had built up inside him began to feel less important. In that moment, he realized something profound. He didn't have to keep living a life of crime. "What if I can't change?" Luke asked quietly. "What if I'm too far gone?" Mr. Thompson chuckled softly. "You're never too far gone. As long as you're breathing, you can always change. It's never too late to make a different choice." For the first time in a long time, Luke felt a flicker of hope. He looked at the pouch of coins in his hand, and without a word he placed it on the table in front of Mr. Thompson. The old man didn't react with shock or anger. He simply smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "Thank you, Luke," he said. "You've taken the first step." Luke stood up to leave, feeling lighter than he had in years. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time he felt like he could face it. The next day, Luke returned to the village and apologized to everyone he had wronged. He found work, helped others, and began rebuilding his life. It wasn't easy, but every day was a step toward healing. As for Mr. Thompson, he never asked for anything in return. His kindness had sparked a change in Luke, and that was enough for him. The two never spoke much after that night, but every time Luke passed by Mr. Thompson's cottage, he would pause, smile, and think about how one small act of kindness had turned his life around. And deep down, Luke knew that he would never forget the old man who had seen the good in him, even when he couldn't see it in himself.